What's up, it's Film Frenzy, and today I'll be ranking all 23 Marvel Cinematic Universe films. This is a huge ranking, compiling from 2008's Iron Man all the way up to 2019's Spider-Man Far From Home. Let's get right into this list and save some time. Number 23, the worst MCU film, Incredible Hulk. So, one of the MCU films has to come at the bottom of the list, and like many lists, it's going to be Incredible Hulk, which is kind of the oddball out of the 23 MCU films. It features a different actor as the Hulk, of course, Edward Norton, and he just brings a lot less charisma, and just the part isn't written as well as Mark Ruffalo's later incarnation of the Hulk, and overall this movie's just kind of bland, doesn't really fit with the tone of the MCU. There are some half-decent action scenes, but a forgettable villain from Abomination, and just some generic plotting make this just a forgettable superhero film. Not terrible by any means, no MCU film is, but painfully mediocre. And at number 22, I have Thor: The Dark World. The Thor series was kind of rough before Ragnarok came out, and this was the real worst of it. The Dark World, again, is a pretty generic and forgettable movie, probably featuring the best example of the forgettable Marvel villains. This is Malekith. He's like an evil, I don't know, elf or something, and he's just some alien species, completely random motivations, forget, probably world domination or something. It does introduce the Aether, which is cool for the MCU. It has some more of Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth as Thor's romance. Their romance was never that great, and yes, the main good thing with this is that it kind of expands Thor's character a little bit, although he's still a bit too bland because it introduces more of the Loki-Thor dynamic and features the death of Thor's mother, but overall, this just is another bland MCU film that has been forgotten. Iron Man 2, the first MCU sequel, comes in at number 21. Oh, if only Iron Man 2 could have lived up to the original Iron Man, that would have been just amazing, because that is a great movie, and this one is just, again, kind of following the last two movies' trend. Forgettable, kind of bland. The villain has a little bit of spark, Mickey Rourke's Whiplash, but he's just another version of Iron Man, basically kind of like a reject version of him in a way, and he really doesn't offer that much to the table. I think Sam Rockwell's Justin Hammer was an interesting dynamic that I would have liked to see continue in the MCU. Unfortunately, that was taken out, and the Monte Carlo scene is pretty cool, but overall, this movie just doesn't offer much. A little bit of expansion to the Iron Man character, but it's more just setting up for Avengers and with having Nick Fury and just setting up the overall MCU more than its own great film, which is unfortunate but necessary. The first female-fronted MCU film, Captain Marvel, comes in at number 20. So, Captain Marvel was a very underwhelming film for pretty much all Marvel fans because this character is so powerful and so awesome. It could have been such a great movie, and Brie Larson's a phenomenal actress, as demonstrated in movies like Room, yet it is not a very good movie, and I think that's just because they do a terrible job at making the character of Captain Marvel. She's bland, cocky, unfunny, and just kind of unlikable at times. The best part of this movie is easily Nick Fury, who's awesome. It's great to see a younger, less jaded Nick Fury in this film. Samuel L. Jackson plays a great job, and the de-aging is excellent. I think the Kree race is also very interesting, and so are the Skrulls. I thought that was a great dynamic, and there was one good twist in the film that I did like a lot, but overall this movie is not too good, unfortunately. Speaking of letdowns, Avengers Age of Ultron comes in at 19. Ultron, we were promised such a great, awesome villain, maybe like a big one that would last many films, but he became just a one-off villain who was pretty generic, world domination, whatever. It offered a good dynamic of like Tony Stark regretting like creating him, and it introduced us to Vision, which was awesome, plus Scarlet Witch, who even though she's kind of meh in this movie, she became an awesome character later on in the MCU. Also Quicksilver, everybody just forgets about him. He was literally in this movie only. He was terrible. It's very unfortunate that they even tried with Quicksilver when the X-Men movies did him so much better with Evan Peters. Overall, this movie, some cool effects, some great scenes like the Thor hammer lifting scene, and some decent comedy here and there, but there's just not a ton to take away from this movie. It is a really weak Avengers movie. And at number 18, I have Spider-Man Homecoming. Here we have it, the first very unpopular opinion of the video. I don't love Spider-Man Homecoming. It's a hilarious movie. It's very fun to rewatch. The jokes are awesome, and the Spider-Man character is very solid, but I feel that the movie just kind of lacks the drama and stakes that are necessary in the other Spider-Man films. Every battle, Spider-Man is left unscathed, and I know everyone praises the Vulture performance of like Michael Keaton, and he does a solid job, but I feel like they accelerate way too quickly into him becoming a supervillain, and I would like to see a more gradual, realistic descent into evil, and the whole twist with him being Peter Parker's homecoming date's father. I thought that was kind of just ripped off of Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin in the first Spider-Man film, which was a much better job, and I get they're trying not to have a Spider-Man origin story, but it's really just a testament to how they shouldn't keep on remaking Spider-Man, because that's such a great origin story, and without it, there's a lack of drama in this film, and I think it really shows. The Ant-Man sequel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, comes at number 17. At least Ant-Man the Wasp is absolutely hilarious. The jokes are firing on all cylinders, just like the original film, but this movie is a bit wonky. It's trying to do something new, which I appreciated, in having a very different type of villain who's kind of more of an anti-hero, struggling type of person, with ghosts, and there's like some twists and stuff. But I feel like there's a lot of potential, but it just doesn't work. And yes, there are some cool action scenes, and they do a great job utilizing the giant and small technology. They do a great job exploring more of Scott Lang and his daughter's dynamic, and it features a great end credit scene that goes right into Endgame. But plot in general, overall, is one of the weaker MCU films. And Ant-Man and the Wasp's predecessor, Ant-Man, comes at number 16. Ant-Man is a very funny and just so enjoyable film that has a great heart and lead character at its core. Paul Rudd makes a fantastic leading man in a superhero film, and Hope Van Dyne and Hank Pym are great supporting characters, along with tons of other hilarious supporting characters like the other ex-cons that Scott Lang is friends with in the film, and the action scenes are pretty fun overall, especially that ending one where they're like battling in miniature on like the Thomas the Tank Engine train set. That was pretty cool, though the Yellow Jacket is a remarkably forgettable villain, and overall the plot is pretty much a basic heist film. It is still a very fun movie, although it doesn't go above and beyond like some of the higher up MCU films. The team up that started it all, the Avengers, comes in number 15. Avengers, the original film, is another one people are going to say is a bit too low on my list, but I was never the biggest fan. I think it's a very important film. It was great for the time, but the MCU has gone and done much bigger and better things. I mean, it's a fun movie and showing like the original 6 superheroes and their team up. There's some fun battles. Of course, the Battle of New York is kind of legendary, and Loki is a fantastic villain. But it's so generic how they're all fighting like, you know, those faceless Chitauri, like alien army. Like it doesn't really feel like there's as much stakes and greenness as some of the later MCU films, and there's not as much of an emotional core or like strong themes throughout. But it is a fun movie, and there's a lot of good humor throughout. Overall, enjoyable, but MCU has gone on to do better things. The original Thor film comes in at number 14. I've always found the original Thor a bit underrated. It is a very solid film, and you know, there are some big faults. Like, I would say the romance between Jane and Thor is one of the weaker points of the film, but it has a very strong emotional core, just like Ant-Man, but this time I think even better with Chris Hemsworth Thor. Maybe it's not the best character, and he does better, of course, in Thor Ragnarok. They really expand his character there. But in the original Thor, they show a great character change from like this kind of arrogant and just like so full of himself, like God basically, to this guy who's willing to sacrifice himself for others, and he just learns a bit of humanity as he's stripped of his powers and his hammer, and it's kind of a fun like bridging between like the fantasy element and like Earth, of course. So it's kind of like this great fish out of water comedy that Chris Hemsworth does a fantastic job with. Loki is a great villain, and it's kind of a cool plot with him and like the ice giants. Another Phase 1 film, Captain America the First Avenger, is number 13. Captain America the First Avenger has always been one of my favorites of the early years of the MCU, largely because Captain America is my favorite character, and it's probably this movie that made him that. It really just shows such a great transformation from this like small guy like who's just like weak and just wants to be a patriot and just fight for the American army but can't, to like just having the physical capabilities of Chris Evans. And it is great to see how he stays a good man and just his selflessness. It's such a patriotic and just optimistic movie, and it's just a beam of light in the MCU overall. There's been a lot of dark movies, but this one handles the drama so well. There's not a ton of comedy, but it's not necessary, and maybe it's a bit generic at times, and the villain is kind of a bit forgettable with Red Skull, but it uses the World War II set pieces beautifully. The war scenes are excellently shot. It has a tragic and emotional core with Captain America and Peggy Carter's romance that is maybe still the best MCU romance overall. And that ending scene where it is crashing into the ice and is frozen for 75 years, it's just amazing. And just they tell the origin story of Captain America so beautifully. Sure to spark tons of disagreement, Avengers Endgame comes in only at number 12. Oof, I know I'm going to offend a lot of people by putting Endgame this low, but hear me out. So, I feel like Avengers Endgame is more of like a fan service than like its own just great film with its own great plot. It's just kind of separated into like a bunch of different plots that don't really go together that well. Like, for example, it starts with the plot immediately after Infinity War, which I thought was very good and kind of shocking and a great start to the film. Then it jumps 5 years and it goes to a much lighter tone, which was interesting and kind of nice. I think the jokes in this film were very good overall, and the writing was very solid mostly. But I feel like the plot here just kind of got repetitive as they just recruit everybody and try to get all the team back that's still left after the snap. And then the whole time travel thing, it felt like a greatest hits. Like, it was just going back and revisiting the best moments of the MCU. And it's great fan service. It was great to watch and all. And the ending action scene was so long but so awesome. But it doesn't have like this really tight plot that Infinity War or some of the better MCU films have that really just ties all together. And yes, I do love that final ending. Like, it's really great, like the conclusion of the film, and it really marks a great like finale for like the first part of the MCU, I guess like the first 3 phases. But nevertheless, I feel like as its own movie, it just doesn't stand up to the better MCU films. Black Panther is my number 11 pick. Black Panther is a very different MCU film because it takes a bit more of a political stance. It's very, like, current, and I feel like sometimes it aims for the fences, and sometimes it hits them, sometimes it misses. But it does a really good job at showing some, like, political commentary, I have to admit. And I think that the villain Killmonger, though sometimes I feel like the tone sympathizes a bit too much with him, he is still a phenomenal MCU villain, one of the best. Great performance from Michael B. Jordan. Chadwick Boseman, I feel like he's outshined a little bit sometimes by a supporting cast in this. He's a great job at Black Panther, but I would like to see the Black Panther character written a bit better in this film because I think he's really interesting in Civil War. The action scenes are phenomenally shot, though the third act is a bit messy and a bit generic at times. Also, I have to mention that the comedy in this film often isn't that funny. There isn't too much, luckily, but I feel like of all the MCU films, this one's one of the weakest in terms of the jokes it has. But the world building and like the sets and the visuals and the cinematography are amazing, and it makes sense that it was nominated for so many Oscars because of that. It is a very well done film, although I think there are much better MCU films. I'm starting off my top 10 with the magical Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is easily one of the best MCU origin films. It just has such a visual spectacle to it. This is such a great movie to watch in the theaters. It's mind-bending, it's beautiful. I love the finale. It's a very different third act than most of the MCU films, which I thought was brilliant. Although I think the first 2 acts can kind of be compared a bit to Iron Man, and how Stephen Strange is kind of like this jerky, like very successful, like this time he's a doctor, and how he like gains sympathy after like an accident, and he gains his power set, or an Iron Man, he builds a suit and basically becomes a better person. So it's a bit of a retread of Iron Man in some ways, but it still has its own tone to it, and it's awesome. I think the villain, of course, is very, very weak, unfortunately. There's some great lines and great themes throughout the film overall also, and just a lot of emotion and just really good drama. I was very impressed with it. There are some jokes, not a ton, but when they are there, they are very funny. One of the best MCU casts overall, and an amazing origin story. The latest Thor film, the hilarious Thor Ragnarok, is my number 9 pick. After many rewatches, I still maintain my claim that Thor Ragnarok is the funniest superhero movie of all time. It is just so rewatchable and just so hilarious. Every joke lands. There's such a variety of jokes. So surprising. Maybe it rips a bit from like Guardians of the Galaxy, and it kind of infuses a bit of Chris Pratt's Star-Lord into Thor. But that just benefits the character, and it features an amazing story arc of Hulk that continues into Infinity War and Endgame. Tessa Thompson is great as Valkyrie, really awesome character introduced there. Hela was an insanely underutilized villain and very underwhelming, especially when you get Cate Blanchett. Jeff Goldblum is great as the Grand Master, introduces so many different worlds. It's so fun to watch, just so colorful overall. Cordy is really hilarious. Taika Waititi, great writer, director. This film has some pretty good drama here and there too, and some solid themes and some great character development installment of Thor overall. A very bold ending too, with the destruction of Asgard. Overall, Thor Ragnarok is the Thor movie that Chris Hemsworth deserved. The wildly forgotten and unappreciated Iron Man 3 is number 8. I've always found Iron Man 3 insanely underrated. I know the Mandarin twist has both its haters and its lovers. I'm of course one of the lovers, and I think it was just really great to have it played like an actor like Trevor Slattery, who's played wonderfully by Ben Kingsley as actually the Mandarin, and then Aldrich Killian, who I think is a very underrated villain also. I know people hate him, but Guy Pearce I thought did a great performance, and it really just has a great impact on Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. Amazing performance of Tony Stark, maybe his best performance of him, and he just has a great story arc throughout the film. Gwyneth Paltrow gets a lot to shine also, and I just love how it starts with that New Year's Eve party in 1999, and it just shows the revenge that's being seeked by Aldrich Killian. Very great villain and great twists throughout. Very great visuals too, and I think it's awesome how it just derails into this Tennessee town where it's just Iron Man and this 14-year-old boy, and they're getting along trying to rebuild the Iron Man suit. It's really cool. A very unique tale for the MCU, one of the darkest films easily, but the humor is all there, and it is hilarious. This movie fires on all cylinders. It is an excellent film. Another underrated gem, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is my number 7 pick. I always love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It is very different than the original and being more character driven and all about family and just really tying in the relations between the different main characters of the film and exploring more with Nebula and introducing Mantis. Ego was one of the most underrated villains in the MCU, one of my favorites. He's wonderfully played by Kurt Russell. Overall, just a really fun movie to watch. Hilarious, the jokes are always there, still just like the original Guardians. Maybe it doesn't have as good pacing and isn't as fast moving because it kind of stays on Ego's planet for most of the film and isn't just moving around as much, but it still has a stronger villain, very strong themes. Michael Rooker as Yondu is the heart of the film. Great job, great ending and twist. Overall, this movie is just fantastic, and I can't wait for Guardians Volume 3. At number 6, I have the original MCU film, Iron Man. No wonder the MCU is so successful when you have an amazing film like Iron Man starting it off. This really set the tone for how to do an epic superhero origin film for the rest of the MCU, and it is spectacular. I mean, that scene when he comes out of the cave is just so triumphant. I love just the character arc of Tony Stark. Really just brought out Robert Downey Jr.'s best acting sensibilities. It's amazing. That ending when he says, "I'm Iron Man," sets the tone for how the MCU is going to roll. So great. Maybe Obadiah Stane isn't the best villain, but Jeff Bridges still does a pretty solid performance. The supporting players in it are phenomenal. I love that post-credits scene when they introduce Nick Fury and the Avengers Initiative. Overall, this film is a classic, and it really just still lives up to the epicness that was experienced back in 2008. Spider-Man Far From Home, the newest film in the MCU, comes in at a surprisingly high number 5. Spider-Man Far From Home is far better than Homecoming. That's why I'm ranking it so high up on my MCU ranking list. This is a phenomenal film with a very unique villain. I won't spoil it here, but it was definitely a very unique point of view and overall a very different type of superhero movie, which I really, really appreciated. I thought it had a really great, dense plot. If there's any criticism I would have is that sometimes the villain's plan would be slightly just relying on a bit too many external factors. Also, that I thought some of the final action scenes went on a bit too long, but overall this film is phenomenal. It flies by. It's a decently long movie too, which is impressive. I thought the mid-credit scene was probably the best mid-credit scene I've ever seen, and it also had one of the best post-credit scene. Overall, I think it sets up the Phase 4 of the MCU phenomenally and really feels like just a very solid film that has a lot of substance, which I really appreciated. Plus, Tom Holland is phenomenal as Spider-Man. Really just solidifies him as one of the best Spider-Mans. Guardians of the Galaxy comes in number 4. When we saw that first trailer and it said that tagline, "You're welcome," we knew we were getting something special with Guardians of the Galaxy, and boy did it deliver. James Gunn is a fantastic writer-director. These characters are so well developed in just one film, introduced so well. Their dynamics are explored so great, and how you see them change throughout the film. It's just such a wonderful origin film, and the best origin story of all of the MCU in my opinion. It just really ties together nicely, and it would have been great if the villains were a bit better because, of course, Lee paces. Ronan the Accuser is a bit underwhelming, and Nebula isn't used as well in this film as in the future ones, but nevertheless, the lead characters are amazing. There's great themes, emotion, the music is fantastic, the visuals are excellent, and all the worlds that they show are just so cool. This is a fantastic movie. The edge of your seat thriller, Captain America the Winter Soldier, is my number 3 pick. One of the strangest films in the MCU is also easily one of the best. And that would be Captain America Winter Soldier, which is more of like a 70s like political thriller than a superhero film. And I love the like political intrigue and like the twists and turns, just the strong stakes when you find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. is basically just Hydra the entire time. It has a lasting impression on the MCU overall and really just explores finally seeing Captain America in the modern environment. This is his first solo film in the modern environment. I think that's great. Sam Wilson, the Falcon, is awesome, played great by Anthony Mackie. Sebastian Stan's Winter Soldier is a great character. There's such emotion and tension in this film. The hand-to-hand combat is amazing. This is Joe and Anthony Russo's first MCU film, and their wonderful direction really shows. Great screenwriting, great twist. That elevator scene, just such a classic. This movie is amazing on so many levels. Winter Soldier's sequel, Captain America Civil War, is my number 2 pick. Civil War really amped up the tension and does a great job at still being a Captain America solo film while having a lot to do with Bucky Barnes / the Winter Soldier and Iron Man. There's a great riff between them, and it really just doesn't have like take one side or the other. Like it really leaves the audience to decide who they think is right, and they're both right in some capacities with the Sokovia Accords. It is a very dark film, very realistic and gritty. It's a great like kind of psychological thriller, and the villain Baron Zemo is very underrated. Yes, his plan's a bit far-fetched, but it's a very different type of villain, and I think he's explored wonderfully. The action scenes are amazing. I think the airport scene might still be my favorite action scene in the MCU, even better than the Endgame one. Overall, this movie is fantastic. And of course, my number 1 favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe film is Avengers Infinity War. Somehow, Avengers Infinity War even defied my expectations. It delivered so much. It was a cinematic event, and the amazing plotting was just fantastic. Of course, there's going to be some trouble, like, you know, going from like one scene to the next because of just, there's like 8 subplots going on at the beginning of the film, and it's hard to go from one to the next. That's kind of inevitable. You have to pay attention. It's really focused. It's condensed, and it has so much plot in that 2.5 hours, and it's amazing. That ending is just heart-wrenching. It is so emotional, and the characters are just played so well. They give like at least like 5 to 10 characters great times to shine. Of course, some like Captain America aren't going to get as much limelight, unfortunately, but Spider-Man, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Thor, more, they all get so much to show. And of course, Thanos. Josh Brolin is amazing as Thanos, and he is a wonderful villain in this film. Probably the best MCU villain, and this movie overall just has everything you want in an MCU film. Great screenwriting in terms of the drama and comedy, great visuals, great world building and showing off new planets, great character development, great character interactions, great themes, amazing plotting. Overall, this is the best MCU film, easily one of the best super movies of all time. I hope you enjoyed watching my ranking of all 23 MCU films, and I'll see you guys later from Film Frenzy. Make sure to like and subscribe. Goodbye.